Welcome to Basic Black. Some of you are joining us on our broadcast, and others of you are joining us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Callie Crossley, host of Under the Radar 89.7. Tonight, artists of color claiming space in the time of COVID. We, like you, are dealing with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic and are taking precautions. We are working with limited staff, and our guests are joining us remotely. We see you, white American theater. That was the headline of a letter signed by over 300 Black, Indigenous people of color, Broadway-linked creatives demanding changes in hiring practices and more transparency in artistic and curatorial practices. They, like the dancers, singers, and painters of color in Massachusetts, were responding to this summer's racial awakening, responding to an art world that has long marginalized artists of color and their work. At a time when cultural organizations have lost millions of dollars because of COVID-19, how do artists of color survive and thrive? Joining us, Tony Williams, founder and director of the Tony Williams Dance Center and Tony Williams Ballet. He is also the founder of City Ballet of Boston, home of the Urban Nutcracker. Michael Bobbitt, artistic director of New Repertory Theater. He is also a director, choreographer, and playwright. Shaumba Yanje Dabinga, founding artistic director of Origination Cultural Arts Center in Jamaica Plain. And actor, singer, dancer, and educator, Maurice Emmanuel Parent, co-founder and executive director of the Front Porch Arts Collective. He's also a professor of practice at Tufts University for the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies. Welcome to all of you. So let me start this way. You know, the struggle is real for artists of color, always has been. That's not a new situation. But I wonder, in this triple pandemic, which is what we've been discussing on this show, that's COVID-19 spread, that's the economic downturn, and that is also the racial reckoning. How have you all been impacted? And is it worse than you've ever seen before? I'll start with you, Maurice.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I really respond to how you've identified the triple pandemics. It's unprecedented times, but, we are a resilient industry, we're a resilient art form, and we are resilient people. So I'm just really inspired by the ways I've seen people adapt and make new art. Specifically for the Front Porch Arts Collective, we were part of a performance series where an outdoor venue was created in Central Square Theater that was completely COVID safe, and they had doctors on staff to help with the construction of it and the design of the programming. It's called Starlight. So we had a 40-foot stage, which allowed for singing, and each seat was 6 feet apart from each other. And we celebrated, it was a moment to celebrate and uplift some of our Black, there's Dwayne Mitchell right there, some of our artists that have been part of the Front Porch Arts Collective family. And then also, as my life as an educator, Tufts University actually built these really great 4 8-foot-tall cubicles, safety cubicles, plexiglass, so like students could go in there with their masks on, close the door, and take off the mask and perform. And we took it as an opportunity to respond to the second pandemic you put out there, which is the addressing of systemic racism that we've all been dealing with. So all 3 plays as part of that festival in their own way unpacked very specific issues as related to anti-Black racism.
So I hear you saying that you responded to it. So it's about the same as it's ever been in terms of just where you find yourself as an artist of color in general?
Well, I say it's the same, that I won't be stopped, and I just think that we want this company to succeed. There's so much, when you want to make a Black focused anything, the opposition is out there, especially when you want to make a Black centered art space. And then I'm standing in front of 2 people whose institutions I've been a fan of for years, since moving here 15 years ago, and Michael Bobbitt, who's really doing some amazing work in New Rep. So I know I'm in great company, and I know it is unprecedented times. It's very difficult times, but you're
responding. Yeah.
We're responding, and we won't be stopped.
Okay. Tony Williams, speaking of being one of the institutions to which Maurice referred, you have quite a stake in this community. The Urban Nutcracker, for just one of the projects you've done, it's really something that's embedded in the very art culture of this city and town. So where are you now as you face this triple pandemic and try to survive?
just trying to pay the rent, basically, and keeping the doors open. We were impacted quite severely. We had to close down our studio in March, and we didn't get back until August into the studio in the phase 3. And so during the lockdown, I just spent most of my time trying to submit SBA disaster relief grants, et cetera, which, PPP and all of that, just to keep paying the bills. And we were able, actually, we have a scholarship program that was supposed to have gone through May, and we very quickly were doing Zoom classes for those kids, and they met once a week. And then as far as the Nutcracker this year is concerned, of course, it's been canceled, and it would have been our 20th anniversary, and it was quite unfortunate. And unfortunately, the dancers need space to dance, and not having a studio, it's been very hard for them doing Zoom classes in their homes. But we do plan to be back next year in 2021. Hopefully, COVID will be passed, and we'll be back then. But right now, it's just collecting unemployment until it runs out. And my dance center, we're at about 40% of where we were last year. And of course, we're fully COVID safe with things. And I really love it when the kids come in, they all wear masks and they have no problem with masks. And if your mask tips down from the nose, they'll say something to you. Put that mask all the way up.
Shayumba, it sounds like you're doing the same kind of adaptation in this moment.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. It's been a challenge. We did have to do, as Tony did, a shutdown in March, and then try to figure out how to bring our classes, to aboard on Zoom, which was a nightmare in the beginning, with the freezing and children not having access to, Wi-Fi. That posed a lot of problems. But we continued to push forward carefully and still be able to give quality arts to the best of our ability via Zoom. We also, our executive director, Misa Debinga, spent a great deal of time applying for money everywhere she can find it, including grants to try to help us make sure we can pay our rent and pay our staff and still produce what we usually produce, but on a smaller scale. We were able to open back up in July with smaller numbers. We received some great donations in order for us to do our Summer Ready Set Dance program. And they were actually able to do a performance at the end of the summer, which there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. I mean, I was floored. We rented a stage from the Boston Dance Alliance, and we produced a production in our parking lot. And, having our young people in a shutdown from March until July, it was a big deal for our families to be able to see that. And so, we have our COVID ready classes. So we have hand sanitizer everywhere. They're wearing their masks. We allow mask breaks. We have smaller numbers in the studio, but they're doing the work. We did have to shut down our production. So our Kwanzaa musical that usually happens in December and a lot of our dance concerts, we had to cancel those like a lot of the other studios. But we are excited about the energy our young people are pushing forward, even through their stress and depression. So we're happy that we're able to be in the studio and have a space for our young people to work.
And Michael, you're the new guy in town, relatively speaking. So your adaptation, not only to the triple pandemic, but also being in this space, being in Boston, did that afford you actually more room to respond in the moment?
Possibly. I mean, this is. I don't know how long I can keep claiming the new guy. I'm in my 15th month, but I'll keep it for now because it does open a lot of doors as the new guy. Yeah. So New Rep has canceled every single main stage show that we had booked, equating $900,000 of loss, which is 56% of our budget. So it hit us hard. But we were committed to making sure that we kept the staff. No one has been furloughed or laid off. To doing a lot of work to raise money. New Rep is also a predominantly white institution, and I'm the first person of color to lead the organization, coming in with a significant amount of EDI training and experience. And so you can imagine those kinds of conflicts that arise when I am trying to institute an anti-racist culture. I will say that we have been very successful in starting to build the anti-racist culture and not tolerating any racism. One of the first things we did in response to our Black Lives Matter statement, I had a number of patrons that called to have negative responses. And we wrote them back and called them and told them they're no longer welcome to be patrons of the theater. When we say we're not tolerating racism, we are really not tolerating racism. And we have been very active in building an action plan to show people of color that we mean what we say. We're not just putting out solidarity statements, we're putting out action steps. I'm really happy that the staff has pivoted. We've been doing everything we can to employ artists as much as we can. We just did a count yesterday, and we've given some kind of employment to 95 artists since everything has shut down. So I'm happy about that. I want it to be more, but we have a lot of work to do. One of our big successes was our historic moving outdoor play that we did in partnership with the Watertown Historic Society and the Watertown Free Public Library about a black barber who was born and raised in Watertown, who enlisted in the 54th Regiment, the same regiment of the Civil War that was made famous by Denzel Washington's movie. And that had a lot of patrons come to see it. It exceeded its goal. Hoping to bring her back in the spring, and right now we're just trying to stay in a creative space so we can generate more content to employ artists and to engage our audiences.
All right, so you came right out at the beginning of your tenure saying this is who we are going to be in response to, as you say, equity, diversity, and inclusion. You said EDI, but I want people to know what that was. And I referred earlier to the letter written by a lot of theater folks, including Maurice, by the way. He signed that letter. But I guess what I think a lot of people would want to know is, so much of this discussion has been centered around artists of color and what the directions that the art world should be moving in. How are you feeling now as this discussion has been going on? There's been some response. Are you feeling as though that's being heard and things are changing? Or Tony, as you said at one point, black artists have always been marginalized, so you're not certain that's going to change? Tony?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I think, I don't know. I was, when all of this happened this past summer with George Floyd, there was a flurry of activity with my friends, a lot of white friends, and they were saying that they hope that this wouldn't die down, that we would keep on trying to provide more diversity in the country, and then of course through out the art community as well. And I feel that I've been at this for 25 years trying to do productions that included diversity, and I'm hopeful that that we will come back. But I guess what I was saying in the past was that I think there's a certain tokenistic aspect to what I've been doing, and it's not quite mainstream, even though I've been successfully putting on productions for the past 20 years. So my hope now is that maybe next year when we do come back, that folks will say, oh, they'll look at what I do. My big production is the Urban Nutcracker, that folks will see it in a different light as, post pandemic, post-election, past November 3rd, and I'm hopeful that things will continue on.
Okay. Maurice, you did sign that letter, that original letter in the summer. How are you feeling now in terms of response, and are you hopeful that maybe things have moved in a direction that's permanent and positive?
I'm hopeful, and I have actually a few thoughts about this, as you might imagine. I'm hopeful that there will be lasting change. I know Michael and I and many other arts leaders are taking the We See You What and seeing how we can make it more specific to Boston, the needs of Boston. And I always think of like double consciousness, right? Like I lived in New York for a long time, but moving to Boston was a big move for me. But I moved because I was able to join a community of artists and a legacy of theater making, and also a legacy of Black theater making that I felt at home in, and it really changed my career. I spent the majority of my career here. So you can love a place, but then the double consciousness also realize significant change needs to happen. Being a performer on the stage in a predominantly white institution or a theater company and doing a show that is rooted in Black narratives and Black culture, and then looking out and not seeing any of you in the audience is a way of harm. That's a choir boy that I directed, and we actually took that and we're very intentional about changing the audience, because we want an audience like when I went to go see the last Kwanzaa performance I saw at Originations. We wanted that kind of feeling in the audience when we were doing choir boy on stage. So we built a Blackout Boston performance series where we contacted organizations and it was inspired by Blackout on Broadway, where we invited people who were part of Black institutions who consciously subvert the narrative and make sure the audience looked exactly as much as possible as the stage reflected the same culture back and forth. Because it's almost like we talk about in theater how when somebody's mom or auntie or cousins in the audience is like, wait, I see somebody Black in the second row. It's like, yeah, that's my family. Oh, great. And then you can hear the response. It's like your family's in the audience. So we want to make that be very intentional about creating that event, and also make sure that we are clear that because whenever you want to focus Blackness, people think it's anti-whiteness, so they think it's exclusionary. They think it's the hated term reverse racism, which just makes my skin crawl. And it's like, it's actually not. We're actually subverting the systems and made the places, the audiences so white in the first place, and we're taking something off sale. It is a specific performance event, so that is not excluding anybody, but actually being inclusive and trying to subvert systems.
Shaun, but in this moment, has the racial reckoning moved anything that's significant for you?
First, I wanted to say Malik, one of our Origination members, was in Choir Boy. Choir Boy was amazing. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Being the daughter of two immigrants from the Congo, we've made sure from the beginning, we've always focused on Black, African American, African Black. We make sure our young people understand the power of where we came from and what they can do. With our production of Our Story, we touch on our history from before Africans were enslaved all the way through life in society today. And so the racial awakenings that happened here, didn't change what we do. It did make our students work even harder. They were organizing protests. Our students as young as 9 and 10 were organizing physical protests, marching through Nubian Square to the police station where leaders came out to speak. They were participating in panels, online discussions, regarding the racial awakening. So we've been doing it for a long time, and our young people are so educated and invested in their history. And it's important. I think the world needs to wake up. It needs to wake up and pay attention, because, without us, the arts wouldn't exist. They wouldn't be the way they are without Black people, without African Americans. And so we continue to do it. We did it from the beginning, and we'll continue to push forward with it every chance we get.
Michael.
Yeah, I give a shout out to my friend Maurice. Blackout Boston was a profound moment. I felt like family. It felt like church, and I haven't been to church in a long time, but it felt like the time I was in church. It just felt so good. And I think about I have to keep hope, because to me, the moment I say that it's not going to happen, I feel like I have sealed the deal of not making it happen. I think back to the 200-year institution of slavery, which was the most lucrative business venture in the world. The fact that we were able to end that gives me hope that we can end this thing we made up called racism. I do think that the theater community has failed in building anti-racist structure. We have been pontificating about this for 30, 40 years, and we haven't really changed the way our audiences look. And I kind of believe that's because we focus too much on programs and not enough on what's happening behind the scenes, like on our boards and in our operations and in our marketing and in our finances. And that's, to me, where racism is held in place. So what I love about that We See You What document is that it goes through every single aspect of the way theater is made in this country, and it is pushing people to make change. And the one thing that really activates me to build action plans and to carry out action plans is that, in my experiences, white people do not stay guilty long. And so we have to get what we can get right now, because who knows when they're going to change their mind. And they still have legal and social power to make whatever rules they want to make. So we have to get whatever we can get now. I also have been focusing on making it, at New Rep, and also in my personal life, making it difficult for racists, either overt or covert racists, or people that have been who are complicitly racist, to not be racist. So I'm trying to put policies and procedures and cultures in place to make it difficult for them to be racist. The changing of their hearts and minds, to me, is the long-term game. Like, if you've been on this planet for 20, 30, 50, 70 years, you're not going to change your mind about how you feel about black people in a few months or a few years. It's going to take a long time. But what we can do is make it difficult for you to say and do the things you've done. I think about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That was a policy and a culture shift. There were still lots of people that hated black people, and they still are out there, but they couldn't discriminate against us, at least overtly discriminate against us. And that's the process I'm using, hoping that over the time, hearts and minds will change.
Now, we've been talking a lot about anti-racism and anti-blackness. Specifically in this conversation, I want to make it clear that across the board, in every ethnic group, artists have been discriminated against and are suffering a lot of what we've been talking about here. But which brings me to my last question to all of you, which is, why is it so important to have the power of these stories out there in the world, and particularly where they can be accessed by, wide audiences? Maurice, you're nodding your head, so I'm going to start with you.
I'm such a head nodder. I don't know where that comes from. I got it. I was like, oh, my turn. Okay, yeah, no. But I mean, I just really respond to what Michael said, and that, I would say the way that we can start changing hearts and minds are through the arts. I believe that strongly, and I felt that. And I think that's the beauty of particularly theatrical form, is personifying and putting stories that you might have read about on the newspapers, you might have heard, or you understand thematically, but to see someone and I guess maybe I'm old school. I'm excited by the merger of theater and film, but I love just going to a space and seeing someone perform live in front of me, knowing that we're going on this journey together, we're breathing the same air, we're having the same energy. And I think that is a way that we can change hearts and minds. So I think making art that is specifically about certain narratives and specifically about certain cultures, and make sure that culture is represented in the audience, but then also make sure you're inviting everyone, because they get to play in front of them a narrative and then feel emotionally in like almost a safe space. But I don't like safe space. I like brave space. Ask them to be brave to go on this journey with them, with the people on stage, and hopefully that will start changing hearts and minds. But I agree, it is a long game, but I think that's how you really can get to the heart of the matter.
Shomba, you started that, but can you add to that?
So I'll put it this way. December 5th, we're hosting Twist and Shout. It's our big annual gala that we usually do in person every year. And it's a family event. We give people awards. It's incredible. We had an opportunity to not do it this year, to just say, forget it, throw our hands up in the air. Maybe we'll try it again next year and see what happens. We didn't do that because we had to look at the bigger picture. We had to make sure our young people, our students, our children, our families knew that we valued them. We wanted to make sure the world could see our young Black and brown children doing what they love and delivering messages through the arts. So we have to continue to push forward. We have to continue to to push boundaries, to knock down walls and make sure people understand that we're here. We're not going anywhere. The arts are important. The arts save lives. The arts heal and the arts matter. And so we have to continue to do everything we can do to keep it up and keep it invested and alive.
Tony, briefly, if you can.
Yeah. Sure. When I first did the Urban Nutcracker, I wanted to do something that took the traditional classical with the current contemporary urban experience. And this sort of has to do a little bit with my background, Black father, white mother, and how do you bridge those two together? And I thought I could do it through dance. And that was my inspiration to do the Nutcracker. And the first year we did it at the Strand Theater, I had a friend who came to see the show for the first time. She came from the burbs, and she is white. And she said to me afterwards that for the very first time going to live theater, I sat next to a Black person. We had such a great conversation. And so I felt, then that I had a successful production.
Michael, we're going to have to get you on the other side because that's the end of our broadcast and the end of our show. I want to thank all my guests. Thank you for joining us. And stay with us as we continue our conversation on Facebook and Twitter.